Cold open, locked out of my own home. The knob didn't turn. My kitchen door, the one I've polished with lemon oil for 20 years, resisted me like a stranger's gate. From the other side came the clink of dishes, a burst of laughter, and my daughter-in-law's voice floating bright, as if nothing sacred stood between us. For a second, I thought I had misheard, misremembered, misplaced my authority like a set of keys. I pressed my palm to the wood, still warm from the oven heat. My hands had always commanded. "Hello? It's me," I said. Ridiculous words in my own house. Open up, a whisper, a shush, the soft scrape of a chair. Then more laughter, lighter, sharper, practiced. I felt the hum of the refrigerator through the door and the hum of humiliation under my skin. That room has fed every holiday, every fever, every apology I couldn't quite make. It knows my footsteps. Yet the lock answered, "Not today." I tried the knob again. "Sweetheart." I called, meaning both of them and neither. "Is everything all right?" My son didn't reply. His silence threaded through the keyhole like a draft and settled in my chest. I pictured my blue mixing bowl, the one my mother gave me, cupped in hands that didn't ask. I imagined my spices rearranged, my knives turned the wrong way in their block. "Little violations, dressed in domesticity, please," I said. "Because pride is heavy, and sometimes you set it down to pick up peace. I need to get my tea." Footsteps approached, stopped. A hushed conference. Someone giggled. The kettle shrieked inside like a witness afraid to speak. I pressed my forehead to the door and smelled onion, lemon, and something else I couldn't name. Something sweet and spoiled at once. The hallway felt suddenly too small, like the house had shifted its walls while I slept. Family photos watched me. My son with cake on his cheeks, the three of us new and hopeful. My late husband holding a turkey we roasted together the first Christmas after chemo. In those frames I belonged. Here. Now, I waited in my own doorway like a guest who'd come at the wrong hour. "Open," I said. The word flat, unfamiliar in my mouth. A shadow moved under the door. The lock clicked half-hearted, not yielding. I heard my daughter-in-law murmur, "Just a minute, the way you speak to salespeople." Something inside me answered back, old and steady. This is my home, yet I was treated like a stranger. My hand tightened. I turned the knob one more time and felt it give just a hair, just enough to see a sliver of what they were hiding in plain sight. Ledger of sacrifice. All I gave before the door ever locked. There were other Loxbolite ones. I remember the first winter after my husband died, when the heating bill made the mailbox feel like a threat. I sold the bracelet he'd saved for, the one with the tiny gold leaves, and pretended I'd grown tired of jewelry. I used the money to keep the radiators speaking and to buy groceries so my son and his wife could come home to warmth and stew. They did, and I ladled silence into their bowls. When they moved into our house for a little while, I cleared the guest room, boxed up my books, and told myself that love is a kind of storage. I slept lighter to be up for the baby's cries. I learned to make oat milk because she said the baby's belly didn't like real dairy. I kept my recipes on my side of the counter. Money, too. Rents and gaps and little emergencies. $300 for the car brakes, $86 for a school kit. $124 a dentist bill they said could wait, but that I couldn't, I told myself. Generosity was my inheritance to them. Since grief left me mostly memories, I bought the groceries that felt like permission slips. Almond flour, because she read it was healthier. Berries, olive oil so green it looked like a spring leaf. I stacked the pantry like a promise that we wouldn't go hungry for anything. Food, approval, peace. On Sundays I cooked. Roast chicken, crisped potatoes, a salad. My son would arrive late, kiss my cheek, murmur "Thanks, Ma," and disappear into his phone. She would drift in with a new rule. No salt for the baby. No sugar for anyone. No touching the knives because she'd reorganized for efficiency. I nodded. Set plates, made room. I thought accommodation was love wearing its practical shoes. I watched their laundry multiply. "Proud of you." I stitched the torn backpack strap, scrubbed formula from the rug at midnight. Each small sacrifice was a bead, and I slid them along the string of my days. Certain they would one day count them with grateful fingers, but gratitude thinned. Requests thickened. The tone shifted from "could you" to "you should." I told myself they were tired. Learning. I told myself patience was a bridge. Then, one afternoon, I opened my pantry to find new padlocks glinting from the flour bins, and I realized the bridge had become a toll road, and I was the one paying at every gate. First refusal. The beginning of tension. It started small. I was stirring soup. My soup. The one my mother taught me garlic first. Then onions. Then patience when she walked in with a bright smile and a new tone. "Oh, we don't do it like that anymore," she said. A sing-song that made the word "we" sound like a club with a velvet rope. I paused with the wooden spoon mid-air. "Like what?" "Frying things," she said, wrinkling her nose. "It's inflammatory. We're modern, you know?" She reached past me and turned the burner down with 2 fingers. "Like lowering the volume on a mistake?" I laughed, not unkindly. Sweetheart, I've been modern in 3 different decades. I lifted the flame back. This recipe survived wars. Her smile iced over. You don't understand how we do things now. The we again. The rope pulled tight. My son hovered in the doorway, a coin spinning. Babe, he started, and faded. I'm making dinner, I said gently. For everyone, well, she answered, soft as a blade. Then make it the way we asked. I heard my mother in my blood. Hold your line. I set the spoon down. No. The word surprised me. It was small and steadier than I felt. A nail in a board. Her eyebrows lifted as if I'd flipped a table. Excuse me? No, I repeated, smoothing the tablecloth with my palm. This is my kitchen. My recipe. I kept my voice even, like carrying boiling water to the sink. She crossed her arms, chin tilted. If you insist on clinging to old habits, don't be surprised when we make changes. The pediatrician says, I raised your husband, I said, and wished I hadn't. Because truth can sound like a trumpet when you only meant a bell. He lived. My son glanced at her, then at me, then away. The coin wobbled. His silence chose a side without saying a word. She switched tactics. Sugar over vinegar. We're just trying to be healthy. You want that for the baby, right? Of course, I picked up the spoon, and I want respect. The burner clicked under my thumb. The blue line steadied. I tasted the broth and found it flat, missing salt. Missing something older. Behind me, in a voice practiced for boundaries, she said, then maybe you should start by knocking. And my son. Public humiliation treated as an outsider holidays used to be my favorite. I would roast the turkey, mash the potatoes, bake the pies 3 kinds, because everyone deserved their favorite. My kitchen would smell of cinnamon and sage. Laughter would spill down the hall, and for a little while the house felt whole. That year, though, the rhythm was different. I walked in carrying my apron folded over my arm, ready to tie it on, only to see her already at the stove, my son at her elbow like an obedient sous chef. Oh, you don't need to worry about anything, she sang, waving a wooden spoon as if she were the mistress of ceremonies. We've got it all under control. I smiled tightly. It's tradition. Let me at least make the gravy. Her laugh was bright enough for everyone in the room to hear. Oh, your gravy is so old-fashioned, too thick. We've been trying a lighter version. People don't like heavy food anymore. The cousins chuckled politely, not sure where to look. My sister-in-law shifted uncomfortably, caught between loyalty and manners. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, as if every pot on the stove had been turned up high. It's the gravy they grew up on, I said softly, my voice trembling at the edges. She patted my arm. The way you soothe a child insisting on fairy tales. Don't worry, we'll save you some to taste later. And just like that, I was dismissed. I stood there, apron limp in my hands as laughter bubbled around me, none of it mine. My son caught my eye briefly, then looked away, stirring the pan she held steady for him. That tiny act, his silence, his refusal to meet my gaze, humiliated me more than her words. The meal came and went, with compliments tossed, her way like confetti. Delicious. So modern. So thoughtful of you. I sat with my plate, tasting the absence of my own hands in the food, chewing resentment alongside dry turkey. When someone asked about my pies, she answered smoothly. Oh, I told her not to bother. Too much sugar. We're trying to be healthier. My fork froze midway. Not to bother. As if years of love baked into crusts were clutter in her new scheme of things, that was the moment the first spark of indignation flared beneath the humiliation. My home, my table, my recipes, yet I was seated like a guest too shy to speak. The burn of silence in my throat was worse than any insult. Behind closed doors, whispers and secrets after that holiday. Little things began to shift, like shadows lengthening before nightfall. At first I brushed them aside. Who wants to suspect family of secrets? But whispers carry differently when you know you're not supposed to hear them. I noticed food, vanishing faster than we could eat it. Bags of rice, jars of sauce, entire trays of chicken I had bought would disappear, yet the fridge still looked oddly bare. One evening I opened the pantry and saw a brand new padlock on one of the cupboards. When I asked, she smiled too brightly. Oh, just keeping the kids out of the sweets? Except the sweets were stacked high on the top shelf, untouched. At night, when the house should have been still. I heard footsteps in the kitchen, hushed voices, the clink of glass. Once, I crept down the hall and saw a sliver of light under the door. It was past midnight. I leaned close and caught my son's voice, low and tense, hers sharper, like knives against porcelain. Then, silence. By the time I dared turn the knob, the light was gone, and the room smelled faintly of something metallic and sweet. Groceries I didn't remember buying appeared, luxury items, imported spices, boxers with foreign labels. Yet she still asked me for money, sighing about bills and unexpected expenses. Neighbors mentioned strange cars pulling into the driveway while I was at church. I laughed it off, but my stomach nodded. One afternoon, coming back early, I spotted a man leaving through the back door, carrying a box. She met me in the hall, smiling too quickly. Insisting he was a delivery mix-up, I began to feel like an intruder in my own corridors. Tiptoeing past locked doors, straining to catch fragments of hushed conversations, even my grandchildren seemed coached, their eyes flicking nervously when I asked simple questions. Suspicion gnawed at me. Was it drugs? Was it stolen goods? Or something darker? My house no longer felt like home, but like a stage where secrets played out behind curtains I wasn't allowed to lift. The unease seeped into my bones. I started to wonder if the humiliation I'd endured was only the surface of something much uglier lurking underneath. The locked door, shock, and betrayal. Then came that day, the lock on my kitchen door turned me into an outsider entirely. I reached for the knob, expecting resistance, and found it bolted. My kitchen, my stove, my pots, barred against me. I knocked once, lightly. "It's me. Let me in." A pause, then muffled voices. A burst of laughter, too loud, too forced. My daughter-in-law's voice rang out. "Just a minute." I knocked harder. Now footsteps scurried. A drawer slammed shut. I heard my son hiss, "Hurry," followed by the scrape of something heavy dragged across the floor. My heart pounded like I'd run a mile. "What's going on in there?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Silence answered. Then, the faint sound of tape being ripped, cardboard folding. I pressed my ear to the door and caught the sharp tang of spices, but also something acrid, chemical, wrong. I slammed my fist against the wood. "Open this door." Finally, the lock clicked. The door creaked just enough for me to see a sliver of the room. Boxes stacked high, labels I didn't recognize. A stranger's coat tossed over my chair, and on my counter, the one where I rolled out pie crusts for decades, an open box filled with small, glittering bottles, the kind you don't find in any grocery store. My son's face appeared in the gap, pale and tight. "Mom, just go to your room." "Okay." My breath caught my room. "This is my house." Behind him, my daughter-in-law snapped, "Don't let her in." Her eyes flashed hard and unashamed. I pushed, but he held the door with trembling hands. The betrayal in his grip stung worse than any word. In that moment, realization crystallized. This wasn't just disrespect. It wasn't about my recipes, my traditions, my authority. They were using my home for something secret, something dangerous, something that made them lock me out like a trespasser. I stumbled back, heart racing, a heat rising in me that had nothing to do with shame anymore. I had been silent, patient, humiliated, but this was different. This was betrayal that smelled of crime and danger. I stared at the door, at the shadows moving under it, and made a choice. With trembling fingers, I reached for the phone. My voice came out steady. "Cold operator," I said. "Connect me to the police." Calling the police, crossing the line, my thumb hovered over the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. I had dialed those numbers only once before in my life, when my husband's heart gave out and the world cracked. Calling now felt heavier, because this time it wasn't about saving a life. It was about drawing a line against my own son. Shame wrapped itself around me like barbed wire. What kind of mother betrays her child to strangers in uniform? What kind of grandmother risks tearing her family apart with a single call? I closed my eyes and for a moment saw him small egg running across the yard with grass stains on his knees, yelling, "Watch me, Ma." I had always watched, always protected, always given, but the memory blurred into the present, his grown hands bracing the door against me, siding with her, locking me out of my own kitchen as if I were the intruder. My heart cracked in two directions at once, love pulling one way, dignity pulling the other. The phone felt steady now, steadier than I expected. My voice, when it came, was low but firm. "Police, please, I need help." The operator's tone was routine, impersonal, but to me, every question echoed. "What is your emergency?" I whispered the address, then louder, stronger. "My son and daughter-in-law are hiding something in my house." I'm afraid when I hung up, my hands trembled, but inside, something had shifted. The years of sacrifice, the months of humiliation, the nights of doubt, all of it condensed into a single truth. Enough. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard, knowing that the wheels were turning now, that uniforms and questions and flashlights were on their way, and still, a small voice whispered, "What will they think of me?" But another, louder now, answered back, "What will they think of themselves?" For the first time in a long time, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift, replaced by something sharper. Resolve, the confrontation, secrets. Sepal dread and blue lights washed over the curtains like a storm rolling in. The crunch of tires on gravel, the slam of car doors, it was all louder than I expected. I stood frozen in the hallway, palms damp as the knock thundered against my front door. "Police, open up." The kitchen door rattled. My daughter-in-law's voice rose, panicked. "Don't let them in." My son muttered, frantic. "What do we do?" I stepped forward, voice steady, though my knees shook. "This is my house. I'll open the door." When I turned the knob, 2 officers filled the frame, stern faces, flashlights cutting through the dark hallway. "Ma'am, we received a call. What's the situation?" I pointed toward the kitchen. "They've locked me out of my own room. Something's going on in there." One officer nodded, moved past me, and pounded on the inner door. "Open up now?" From inside came scrambling, boxers shifting, a hissed argument. Finally, the lock clicked and the door creaked wide. My daughter-in-law stood with arms folded, chin lifted in defiance. "You can't just barge in here. This is a family matter." But the officer brushed past her, scanning the counters, the stacks of boxes. He lifted one flap, revealing rows of bottles with designer labels, tags still attached. Another box spilled packets of pills, sealed but suspicious. "What's all this?" he demanded. My son's face drained of color. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" I cut in, my voice shaking with fury. "Because it looks like you turned my home into a marketplace for stolen goods. It looks like you betrayed me." She snapped back, eyes blazing. "You don't understand. We needed the money. It was just temporary." Temporary. My laugh was bitter. "You've been using my house like a warehouse for lies." The officers began snapping photos, muttering into radios. One pulled my son aside, asking questions. He stammered, tripped over Half-Truth's eyes, darting to her as though waiting for instruction. She glared at me like I was the criminal, her mask finally slipping to reveal the steel beneath. "Ma'am," one officer asked me quietly, "did you know what was happening here?" I swallowed hard. I suspected. Tonight, they locked me out, and I knew. My voice cracked. "This is my home. They treated me like a stranger." The room erupted with voices, hers, shrill and defensive, his, weak and apologetic, the officers, firm and unyielding. And through it all, I stood rooted, watching the chaos spin around me like a storm I had finally named Dot. My son caught my eye once, desperation flickering. I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the lock, the silence, the months of humiliation, and I knew this storm was theirs to face. Vindication at last, respect restored. When the noise finally settled, the house looked different. The boxes were sealed, tagged, carried out by gloved hands. The kitchen, my kitchen, smelled of sweat and shame. I stood by the table, hands flat on the wood, and for the first time in years, everyone was silent when I spoke. "I have given more than I had to give," I said slowly. "I paid your bills. I cooked your meals. I raised your children when you were too tired. I emptied my pockets, my hands, my heart, and in return, you locked me out. You made me a stranger in my own home." My daughter-in-law rolled her eyes, but her lips trembled. "You don't get it. I get it." I cut her off. "I get that respect is not something you can beg for or buy. It is something you either give or you lose. And you lost it." My son looked down at his shoes, shoulders slumped. For once, he didn't rush to defend her. He didn't say I was overreacting or tired or old. He said nothing because there was nothing left to say. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of recognition of consequence, of the shift in power that comes when truth finally stands without apology. I drew a breath, lighter than any I had taken in months. My dignity, once trampled, stood beside me again. The kitchen was mine. The house was mine. And so was my voice. Moral plus reflection plus CTS. When I look back now, I don't just remember the humiliation of being locked out, or the sting of hearing laughter on the other side of a door that should have been mine to open freely. I remember the moment I chose to stop being silent. A home is sacred. It holds our memories, our sacrifices, our love. And when that sanctity is violated, whether by strangers or by family, it demands a response. Respect once lost is nearly impossible to restore, and dignity once reclaimed becomes unshakable. I learned that love without boundaries is not love at all, it is servitude, and I will never again mistake my silence for kindness, or their disrespect for power. So I tell you this, not as a woman broken by betrayal, but as a woman who stood up in the ashes of it. My humiliation became my strength, my silence became my voice, and my house, at last, became my home again. Now I ask you, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? And if you believe in standing up for yourself no matter how late, no matter how hard, subscribe, and join me for more stories like this.